everybody. Welcome to Church History for Chumps. My name is John Simon, and this episode is sponsored by the Northern Baptist Convention, where their slogan is, "Ask the others, guys, why they left." I'm here with my good friend Taylor Treadway, and we have a special guest today, Mr. Tyler Sanders. Tyler, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah.
What? How long did that take you to write? I hate that joke.
I just think of stuff, man. I just think of stuff.
Yeah,
I try to keep the sword sharp. You know what I'm saying? I gotta keep working on things. So it's all good.
We don't run from the truth of our history. But we do.
I love the.
But we do apologize
historically,
for it.
That's not exactly true.
We do admit it.
That's right. Up until as of 2018, we've been very repentant of our ways. So,
yeah, that's right.
It's almost 10 years, right?
Tyler is a good friend of mine. He's actually the director of marketing at Gateway Seminary. But more importantly than that, he's a PhD student that studies ecclesiastical histories.
Very nice.
It's true. He's the most educated person in this little call right now.
In this podcast.
Yeah,
that's true.
That can't be right.
Tyler, I don't know anything about you, man. I've literally met you like 5 minutes before we started. Do you mind if we just have a little rat-tat-tat? Love to.
Sure.
Where are you from?
Yeah. Well, I was born in Texas, moved to Mississippi, like right before I turned 5. So I really grew up in Mississippi. Always considered myself a Texan still, like all the way through like high school and college. I would tell people I'm really from Texas. I don't know why I had that such a severe hang up on that, but I can admit now I really grew up and lived in Mississippi. I went to University of Mississippi, Ole Miss for college. I was an English major there. Grew up in church. We were kind of joking earlier. So I grew up, most of my time in Mississippi was at a Southern Baptist church in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. But before that, we were part of a Presbyterian church. So I've been double dunked. I think I'm good to go. I guess I've been sprinkled and dunked. So,
right.
I'm kind of double covered there. And grew up in church. Became a Christian right after I graduated high school. I really had this kind of big moment at like a church camp where I just felt like the clearest like conviction of like sin in my life. I can't do anything about it. Like I'm fully dependent on Christ for to fix this sin problem I have. And that was a big switch. Got into college and went to Ole Miss and was part of a Baptist student union up there, and joined a Baptist church up there as well. But the thing in Mississippi, like collegiate ministry in Mississippi, Baptist collegiate ministry is really focused on international missions. So they like to send students out to go, typically with IMB on like summer mission trips and stuff. So I got involved with that. Was a big kind of expansive thing for me that really grew kind of my I think my understanding of like God's global vision and God's like care for the nations. And that was such a big switch for me. It really the first thing I did that was a really major kind of mission trip for me was 2 months in the Philippines. After my sophomore year in college, and that was important for a few reasons. It was really big kind of spiritual development time for me, but also I didn't know what I was going to major in college, and I kind of knew I needed to decide after that. Like I'd kind of taken everything I could except major classes, and the cool thing was in the Philippines you take a siesta in the afternoon. So we were kind of in a pretty rural area. Lots of people doing farming. So they come back in from, working outside and take a nap in the afternoon. So we would do that too. And it gave me a lot of opportunity to read. And I just like blew through all the books I had brought, and I started reading all my teammates' books, and read a lot of good stuff. Kind of got a much better theological foundation and a much better understanding of grace through that. And that really started leading me towards thinking about ministry, some kind of ministry future. So I wrapped up college, did some church planning internship in Seattle, knew I was interested in seminary,
Hmm.
and ended up coming out to California to be part of then Golden Gate Seminary. Now we call it Gateway Seminary. But when I joined, we were still up in the Bay Area, and I got in my first one of my first classes was with Dr. Chris Chun, who's still at the school. It was church history, and my thought was I need to go ahead and knock this one out because what could be more boring than church history? And quickly got in there and yeah, exactly. Taylor knows. Yeah, just got totally flipped on that, and I thought this is like the best. This is so interesting to me, and I finished out the semester, decided I was going to take every class I could with Dr. Chun, and I really ended up focusing a lot on church history, my MDiv. And I was interested in PhD when I graduated several years ago, and couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do for a dissertation, and had some other stuff going on in my life. I got married. The school moved to Southern California. I got a full-time job with the schools. All this kind of busyness took over, and I was able to kind of ignore this desire to do a PhD for a couple of years, and had a kind of a chance meeting with that same professor, Dr. Chun, and we met up at he left his like laptop in my office, and so we met up at a coffee shop for me to get it back to him close to where he lives and close to where I live now. And like an hour later, he had convinced me what I should do, and he was like, "You should study Andrew Fuller." And his first big pitch was like, so his dissertation, I got it over here. I can show you guys in a sec. Was on the influence, like the legacy of Jonathan Edwards in Andrew Fuller. That's what he wrote on, and he was like, there's so much to do on Andrew Fuller, Tyler. There's a book on Jonathan Edwards' view of the Trinity. No one's done that for Andrew Fuller yet. You could do that. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I got into it, and I started looking into that. And then I was reading an introduction to a biography on Fuller, and it's mentioned at the end, like, no one's really talked enough about Andrew Fuller's political theology. I thought that's kind of cool. So that was kind of thinking I would do one of those too. And then Dr. Chun one night, there's another Fuller scholar named Peter Morden. We'll probably talk about him a little bit later in this episode because he kind of wrote like the most like fundamental, like kind of critical biography of Andrew Fuller. He's the principal, which is like the president of Bristol Baptist College. And he came over to like speak at an event, and he was staying with Dr. Chun, and Dr. Chun invited me and another guy over to have dinner with him, and they were talking about this project that he was already working on. Morden was working on with a PhD student, where Andrew Fuller wrote in shorthand. So he wrote his sermon notes in a shorthand, and when Andrew Fuller's son died, the ability to translate these notes was lost. There was like an incomplete key. But no one had Morden had worked on it for years, couldn't quite figure it out, had other people like shorthand experts try to work on it. No one could crack it. And there's like 8 or 9 of these little journals, they're probably this big, just full of these notes. And a few years ago, a guy at St. Andrews, a professor at St. Andrews and a bachelor level student, they cracked it. The student kind of figured out, he was able to match up some a shorthand, instead of shorthand sermon notes to a longhand sermon that was, written out by Fuller, and he was able to figure out the rest of the translation. So they built a key, and that night, I was like, I think I need to do that. I think that might be the key. So that's what my dissertation is going to be on. I'm literally just going to be translating shorthand notes. So that's kind of one of my goals this summer. I'm almost done with my seminars, and my goal this summer is to learn how to do the actual shorthand translation, and then
and let that be a lesson to all the pastors listening to this podcast right now, that you may be important one day. So make your notes a little bit more legible.
Yeah.
I think that's a good takeaway from all we were talking about just now.
Well, it's
Um,
funny. It's a lot of guys would burn their notes.
oh my god.
They would because they were worried about that. Like
Yeah.
that was a big thing with like John Owen and Richard Baxter. Like Richard Baxter, none of his stuff it all survived. So we know all these things about Richard Baxter, and like John Owen like had all of his stuff burned, and so we don't know much about his personal life. But they would do that because they were like, I don't want my half-baked thoughts on the atonement or whatever to like get published one day, because like
Yeah.
the finished work is what I want out there.
I ever since I learned that like all of the authors that I love the most have like written retractions at their old age of their life where they're like, hey, okay, so I was wrong about this, I was wrong about this. It just it really makes me just feel a little fishy about having anything half baked out in the ether for people to read. But
Yeah.
I don't know, I love that. All right,
It's a
Tyler,
major
before we get
challenge in
started,
social
we have a
media.
tradition on our show. It's called 10 words or less. So I'm just going to ask you 3 questions, fairly straightforward, and you just have to do your darndest, as Taylor will share. It doesn't always have to be under 10. It can sometimes be way over. And yeah, so we'll just go from there.
Follow
Okay,
the rules, Tyler.
I'll do my best.
Yeah. Question number 1. Being a man from the South, being from Texas, give a 10-word pitch for any listener to root for one of your favorite sports teams from anywhere, college, pros, whatever. 10 words or less.
Oh boy, let's see. I'm a big college football fan.
Okay.
So the reason you should root for Ole Miss, my team, is Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was our college football coach, and he just left us for LSU, the worst team in the country.
That's oh gosh.
Root for Ole Miss. Come on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that 2 words. 2 words
Yeah,
is all
Lane
we need
Kiffin.
there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Tyler, were you at Old Miss when The Blind Side was happening?
Yeah.
Like Sandra Bullock was there?
Yeah.
Wait, did they film that at Old Miss?
No. So that's actually, I watched the movie. It's such a heartwarming story. The real story is not quite like that, of course, but I watched it and like there's a lot of ridiculous stuff in that movie. But the most insane thing is when they're moving him in to Ole Miss at the end of the movie, there are people walking around in the background wearing like sweaters, and moving day at Ole Miss is like, I mean, it's like the temperature of the sun. It's,
I was gonna say, wouldn't it be like July?
There's literally, yeah. So it's like early August, late July, and they literally outside of the dorms, they'll put up like kiddie pools full of ice and just have thousands of bottles of water because people will just pass out. It's too hot.
These are all people who might be moving here for the first time, and they just don't know about that southern humidity. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is unreal.
Okay,
so that
question
was the
number
most
2.
inaccurate part of the movie. Got it. Okay,
that's right. Everything else is great. Just don't
really
ask Michael Orr who the movie's about. Question number 2. Taylor mentioned that we are, all 3 of us, just a trio of bald and bearded gentlemen. In 10 words or less, I'll let you choose. Either share the story of how you chose to fully go bald, or share just your beard upkeep routine. 10 words or less.
I chose nothing about being bald. Baldness chose me.
That's right. Yeah, you're very Calvinistic about the loss of hair. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. I appreciate.
I'll probably talk about that when I talk about Fuller. There's one of our professors at the seminary. So moral and natural inability is a theme kind of in Andrew Fuller, something he talks about a lot. And it's Dr. Rathel. His example is always like, look at me. I have a natural inability to grow hair. When he said that, I was like, man, yeah,
locked in.
Perfect.
That's me.
All right. Well, we'll have our last question. We'll just have this be a perfect lead in. So why don't we'll just let this be like 10 words or less. Why should people be excited to learn more about Andrew Fuller for the next 45 minutes to an hour, whatever?
Yeah, it's another interesting question. This is going to be longer than 10 words. One of the things I'm interested in is people leaving not just Baptist churches, but kind of low church tradition non-denominational churches and other kind of low church denominations and moving towards like high church, whether that's like a Lutheran or Anglican or sometimes Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that, my read on that is part of the reason people do that is they want to be connected to a bigger tradition. And the Baptist tradition is not as long as the Catholic tradition. We're not landmarkist, right? We don't think John the Baptist is really the first, Southern Baptist or anything.
That's
Maybe
right.
you don't.
Speak for yourself.
Dr. Chun thinks I'm a closeted landmarkist.
Oh gosh.
Not really, but I ask these hard questions and he sometimes just like stares at me and is like, English secessionism is the only way. And then we move on.
So my belief is that we do have a richer tradition than people know. And we should know guys like Andrew Fuller. We should know, the history of Baptists and around the world, but it's a lot in England. We have a lot of roots in England for sure. And knowing more about these guys, I think could alleviate some of that concern of like, sometimes you go to like a Baptist church and an old Baptist church doesn't feel that old. It doesn't feel as old as like a cathedral. It doesn't have that richness, or it doesn't seem to have that richness. But we have a lot. There's a lot of great thinkers in the Baptist tradition. There are a lot of guys who interact in some level with like the broader Christian tradition. And we should learn about those guys and know those guys. And my hope is that would help alleviate a little bit of that. Like Baptists are too focused on today, or they're too worried about being, relevant, or like contextualizing everything to like the modern, modernity. And there's I think in reality there's a very rich tradition we should know. And Andrew Fuller is one of those guys. And at the same time, you read Andrew Fuller, and you'd be like, this guy doesn't seem like he died in 1815.
Yeah.
Like there is a kind of a closeness. I think Baptist today could read Andrew Fuller and be like, man, this guy, he sounds like someone who could like preach this sermon like a decade ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Great. Well, I'm excited to jump in. Let's you light the way, friend.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll light the way. So as I was saying, Andrew Fuller, British Baptist. He dies in 1815. He's born in 1754. His parents are kind of from a dissenting tradition. So, and kind of interesting thing that happens in England, of course, in church history, you have like the great, Catholic versus kind of Anglican fights that are going on for decades, and it's pretty bloody and nasty. And then you have like these dissenters who are coming up, and like no one likes the dissenters. They're kind of always on the out,
and they don't like Christmas, right?
Right? Yeah. Well, so I got to go to England this past summer on like an archive research trip for one of my seminars, and we saw some stuff. Like there's this little town we went to where they claimed it could be the oldest Baptist church, the oldest Baptist congregation. It's hard to tell because like, these dissenting churches, they were kind of like hard to pin down. Their theology changed a lot over not very much time. And like sometimes, that would cause like a split, and then you have like, maybe a Baptist church comes out or some other kind of dissenting church comes out. But this it's called the Old Baptist Chapel. They've opened it up. It's like a little museum now, and it was like hidden in this town. It's the first floor. It was kind of portrayed almost like a business, and they would turn it into like a little Baptist church at night. Even when it was legal to be Baptist, they still stayed hidden because it was very unpopular. And they had some like facsimiles of old English propaganda against a Baptist, and it was kind of hilarious. So like they would have these drawings, so the Baptists were hiding everything, right? And they would do their baptisms like the coldest nights of the year, like at midnight out in like a river. And there's like rumors that these Baptists are doing this, and so they would draw, in the newspapers, like, who are these like weirdos going out and and jumping in the river in the cold at night. They must be like perverts. Like these are like sexual deviants. Like they're out there
skinny
getting
dipping.
They're the skinny dipping. They're getting naked in the water. These weird Baptists, and so there's this interesting kind of history. By the time Fuller's come around, it's not obviously not illegal anymore, and it's not probably as looked down upon, but it's not cool. It's not really cool to be a Baptist. A lot of them are not super educated. There's not like a big, they don't really have like institutional power yet. So there's not like schools really. It's like a low church kind of tradition. So he's coming from like a line of dissenters. Like his parents are both kind of from dissenting churches. Eventually they, when he's pretty young, they moved to this little town called Soham. And this is, they join a particular Baptist church there. And this is where Fuller becomes a Christian, but it's kind of funny how this happens. So the pastor's name is John Eve. It's a high Calvinist particular Baptist church. And in kind of Fuller's telling of his conversion, he's not very kind to John Eve. Like he's like, this guy was not a good pastor. And part of, kind of spoiler here, part of what Andrew Fuller does is he part of the reason he's an important person to follow is he doesn't invent evangelical Calvinism, but he does help develop it. He popularizes it for sure. And he does it in some ways as a response to high Calvinism, hyper Calvinism. So he's growing up in this church, and he really gives John Eve, his pastor, like no credit for his conversion. And instead I know, yeah.
How bad of a pastor do you have to be that you get saved under him and then you still give him no credit?
Yeah. Well, what's funny is like this isn't totally uncommon because Spurgeon's conversion is kind of similar, right? Like he's converted into church, and he's always kind of like sketchy about like who was preaching, and he was like, that was like a deacon or something, and the sermon was
he like insults the guy. Yeah.
It's so like there is this kind of, and I think in both cases they're really trying to, and they're retelling of their conversion. They're making theological points for one thing.
For sure.
So I think Fuller is, I don't think it makes it untrue in any kind of way, but when he has a different theological perspective, like that is going to shape like his understanding of his own life and his own retelling of his conversion. But like a big influence on him is Bunyan, right? So he's reading Bunyan. Everyone's reading Bunyan, of course. Like I mean, he's like one of the most popular authors of all time still today. But he's feeling some tension kind of between like high Calvinist and like this kind of Puritan religion, that's kind of like precedes the dissenters. And the really funny thing, I wrote a paper on this actually in a class. It was my first PhD seminar. I'm going to make you guys guess this because I know you're not going to get it right. There's an important verse, or important section of scripture for Fuller in his conversion, and he matches it to Bunyan in Chief of Grace Abounding. Bunyan's kind of his own kind of conversion narrative. They both reference the same scripture as an important part of their conversion. So we'll play a guessing game. Why don't you guys start off Old Testament versus New Testament? Where do you think it is?
Because of how you framed it, I'm gonna guess Old Testament.
Yeah, Old Testament.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
do
That's
you
the
guys have
only
any
one I'm
guesses?
gonna get right.
What do you have like any big sections of Old Testament you think it might be? Psalm or proverb or
I'd say prophets.
I say
Prophets.
Pentateuch.
It was Esther.
What the heck?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's bizarre, right?
That's wild. Okay.
Now my theory on this is Fuller is so influenced by Bunyan, he kind of wants to like, either that passage meant the same thing to him, or he's wanting to kind of connect himself and kind of like in his retelling of his conversion, kind of say like, I even though I came from like a high Calvinist church, I'm not really, there was something kind of different going on with me, distinguishing himself from some way. So for both of them, the important passage is Esther approaching the king. And that's a big, that's kind of why I think like in Fuller's conversion narrative, he's making theological points because the way he puts it is like Esther had no warrant to approach the king. And that's
Mhm.
a big question in like high Calvinism, hyper Calvinism, is that, you don't really need to preach to the unconverted because they have no warrant to approach God. They don't have like that duty to approach God. And so for high Calvinists, like they weren't interested in evangelism really at all and really only preaching to like the elect was kind of like what they wanted to do. And like the way you would kind of tell you were elect is you had some kind of, something kind of bubbling up inside of you, like scripture's always coming to your mind, or you're kind of
Mm.
going through this, this kind of conviction of sin, but it was always real hard to kind of nail down. And for Fuller, this becomes a big relief. He reads about Esther approaching the king, and she's not really supposed to, but the king is merciful to her and listens to her.
Right.
And that becomes like a major kind of turning point in his life. Because he was, like I think probably many people even still today, like he was feeling a conviction of sin. He was struggling with that. Didn't quite know how to land the ship, and so grace becomes a big relief to him and a big
Sure.
turning point in his life.
So can I ask a question
Um,
about that, Tyler?
yeah,
So you've mentioned we're kind of like we're in this space where uh the two main, like you mentioned, the two main forces in England kind of warring with each other are the Anglicans and the Catholics, but then you have this kind of third branch where they think the Anglicans are still too Catholic for them. And you've mentioned like the high Calvinists and the hyper Calvinists. So I think for me growing up, as someone who professed and still professes Calvinism, hyper Calvinism was kind of used as like this like slur, but then it was also kind of like, oh, but nobody's really a hyper Calvinist because everyone still believes in evangelism, yada yada. But you're saying like during this time that was not like a derogatory term, but really fair to like what they believed.
yeah. So,
Okay,
yeah, that's probably still some level of stereotype in there, but
sure.
in some cases, yeah, very much so. They're really wanting to put a lot of emphasis on salvation belongs to God. Like he
Mm-hmm.
is the one who saves, and there's nothing that humans can do to like earn it in any kind of way. So I think it's kind of comes out of like their view of like election,
Sure.
um, and soteriology of like how they see salvation essentially functioning,
Mm-hmm.
and uh but I think like kind of what you're getting into, it becomes a little bit more of a stereotype, and there's a lot of variety in there. Rathel, who's a professor at Gateway, his dissertation kind of is on this, that there's a lot more variety in high Calvinism, and not everyone feels like you can't like there's no evangelism at all or something like
Sure.
that.
Sure.
Um,
But there are some
but
high emphases on those types of areas that would lead
sure,
to that kind of conclusion,
yeah,
which, like you said, it sounds like it's a lot of like salvation is not a man-made thing; it is only from God. Like there's kind of these intrinsic things that you can't really fake it till you make it, as far as being a believer.
yeah.
So yeah, okay, very
I mean,
interesting.
Well,
All right,
that's a good question, John, because like even Tyler and I obviously spend a lot more time reading Baptists and about Baptists, and I do the modern like delineation of hyper Calvinism is I've seen people just refer to superlapsarians as hyper Calvinists. And my dad yells at me if we use seminary words. So superlapsarian is the doctrine that God logically decreed election and reprobation before creation of the world. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of people that are very good missionaries and evangelists that hold to that.
Mhm.
But we have that label, oh, the hyper Calvinists, they're coming for you.
Mhm.
Well,
That's
and I think
interesting.
today, like that's the kind of stereotype of Calvinism. It's not as big of a fight, I think, as it was probably 15 years ago, when Calvinism kind of became, at least in our Taylor and I, especially our kind of context in the Southern Baptist world, there was like this
Sure.
young, restless reform group that was kind of popping up, and
Mhm.
you have like Piper and like some of these guys who are, really popular Baptist preachers and thinkers, kind of at a popular level, who are who are Calvinist, and the stereotype is that they must be like hyper Calvinist. That's what Calvinism actually means. Like, you know, there's kind of the elect and the intellect or the unelect, and there's nothing you can do about it, and you shouldn't even, think about it, basically. Like, you're a robot.
Mhm.
But that's like, really today, it would be probably very rare to find like a real high Calvinist today. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
some out there. They're going to be more in this lineage, similar to like Fuller, this kind of evangelical Calvinism, because Fuller is still a Calvinist. He's separating himself from this kind of high Calvinist thing, and he's writing a lot to high and hyper Calvinist and kind of unpacking some of their beliefs. But he's still going to be a committed Calvinist in many ways. Like, there's some stuff that kind of feels like maybe it doesn't necessarily fit all the time in Fuller. He's kind of he's a very interesting thinker.
Yeah.
Um,
It sounds like
but
he's gonna try to kind of shift the paradigm a little bit as far as like the Calvinism that he receives versus the Calvinism that he tries to put out.
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And he's not alone doing that. So eventually, like, he becomes the pastor, a very young man at the same church at Soham. John Eve leaves, and he's preaching in this kind of high Calvinist situation, this context, and he's starting to shift. There's like the modern question is kind of like this big question that's starting to um, cause divides in particular Baptists and Calvinists, I think, in general, of like, do sinners have a duty to believe in God? And
Mhm.
I think the implication of that question is like, that may be where guilt comes from. Like, if you have a duty to believe in God and you don't do that, that you have, like, that's kind of the sin that condemns you.
Mhm.
Because if you have no duty to believe in it, how could you get condemned for it, right?
Sure.
So Fuller comes across Modern Question. He starts kind of feeling probably a little bit of tension. He's starting to write his major work, which is Gospel Worthy of All Acceptation. It's Soham, but he's like not really fitting in, and he's a good preacher. And another church calls him. He goes this kind of long period of like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But he eventually takes this church and he goes to a second church, which is the church he stayed at the rest of his life, in Kettering, which now this church is called Fuller Baptist Church. And that's actually where they hold. There's an archive there, and that's where they have some of the shorthand notes. Those are the ones that I'll be translating. So this past summer, for that archive research trip. I went early and I went to Kettering, got to go to the church, and it's crazy. It's like middle of downtown in the small English village. There's like a shopping mall that's like popped up like right next to it, and you have
Mhm.
this church. I think the church has been rebuilt since he was there. Um, but yeah, it's got his name on it, and he comes over here, and basically not only this church but this whole area. It's in Northamptonshire. There's a lot more of these kind of evangelical Calvinists running around, and he feels a little bit more like he's with his people, right?
Mhm.
Um, so like John Ryland Jr., excuse me, I think like Caleb Evans. There's a whole kind of group of guys he's with, and they start kind of reading things together and working through things. And they basically have like an association, like a Baptist association, that they're kind of, um, the Baptist Missionary Society kind of like pops out of this. I think I got it written down somewhere in here. I think it's like 1791 or 1792 is when the Baptist Missionary Society starts. But basically, they are a bit more like what we would consider like early evangelicals. So David Bebbington has kind of written like the classic work on like the growth of evangelicalism in Britain, and that's where you get like the quadrilateral, like the Bebbington quadrilateral, the evangelical quadrilateral. Do you know what they are, Taylor? Let me quiz you. I know you're not prepared for
I
this. It's
could,
probably unfair.
well, I could have hit you with. Are you talking about like the four
It's like four
places that?
characteristics of evangelicals, right? They're like
Oh,
biblicists, right? So they're like
yeah.
very
There's like,
oriented around like answers in the Bible. You're kind of drawing everything you need from the Bible. Crucicentrism, which is like the cross is kind of the center of everything. Conversionism, so they're really big on like evangelism and like converting people.
yeah.
And then the fourth is activism, and activism is a
Oh,
really interesting one,
that's
because a
not the
lot
one
of
I
these
would have
guys,
guessed. That's really interesting. Yeah.
it's fascinating. I think like probably we draw like a distinction today with like social justice, I think.
Right.
But I
Right.
think that impulse that a lot of evangelicals have for like social justice or whatever we would kind of categorize that, like, I think that probably has its roots in this activism. But like for these guys, it's really about missions work, right? Like
Mhm.
that's really a big part of it. Is like there's this conversion. Like we need to go convert people. We need to go preach to the nations. That this is kind of what the Great Commission means, and it's been ignored for a long time. But like we need to go bring the gospel to the world. And then in their activism, that's also part of it. And they're doing things like, Kerry in India is doing evangelism, but he's also, starting schools, and
Yep.
they're helping do like cultural change. Uh, you also have like a lot of these guys are starting to be very critical, like the slave trade. They're not super popular in the South, honestly. You see that big time with like Spurgeon. I think famously, like in the South, I can't remember where it was. It may have been Mississippi. They were like burning Spurgeon's books, because
Wow.
he's an abolitionist.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then
he
too, like,
didn't feel safe going to the South because he didn't
yeah,
want to get lynched.
yeah,
Yeah.
and,
Also, don't tell Stephen Reynolds that I didn't know the Bevington Quadrilateral off the top because he literally just covered it in a lecture 2 weeks
did he?
ago.
I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast because that would be a
I
disaster.
think Pastor Steve, Dr. Reynolds, is a little too busy to listen to this podcast.
It was I could see the look on your face, Taylor. I knew you were about to say it, and then Tyler just kind of jumped in. So
that's right. Yeah, thank you.
I know.
Yeah.
Should I made you sweat a little bit more over it? It wasn't a fair question,
Well,
probably. I didn't prepare
I
you for it.
I could have hit you with the 5 Baptist distinctives, but yeah. Anyway, don't mention
Yeah.
that to Dr.
You guys
Reynolds.
are big on
Well,
numbers.
and
you
I'll
know? You guys
tell
like
you
lists.
this kind of Steve ties
What do
into
you
this
mean,
in an
you
interesting way.
guys? John Simon is trying so hard to distinguish himself. And
Let me
separate
be who I
himself.
am, man. I was ordained as a pastor in the Dutch Reformed tradition for 3 years, man. Let me
Yeah, no kidding,
let me
man.
enjoy my breakup, okay? Let me enjoy my my fresh divorcee years
Yeah, I know. I need
before I
to
figure out what's next.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm just pulling you in.
I know. Goodness gracious. All right.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Steve. So Steve's an old buddy of mine. We went to college together, and his dissertation was on Fuller's influence on Spurgeon. Spurgeon called himself a Fullerite. Um, Spurgeon's another great example of kind of like that evangelical quadrilateral. Like there's been pushback on that maybe that it's too broad, but I do think that's an important thing to kind of consider here. Like that's probably why we call it evangelical Calvinism. Is it's like you kind of have this broader evangelical movement kind of developing, and then particular Baptists are getting brought into it. And it's shifting theology, and Fuller's an interesting guy in that. I think Bevington calls Fuller kind of like an ideal, or like he's kind of like a classical evangelical. He kind of really holds to all 4 of those, or represents all 4 of those kind of distinctives really well.
Tyler, how would you distinguish the particular Baptists? Like who were the other Baptist circles that they were distinct from?
Yeah. So it's a good little bit of Baptist history, I think here. Everyone has an opinion on it, but it's really hard to tell where Baptists come from.
Mhm.
You have like some early Baptists, like John Smith, I think Smythe, I think some people may say it, and then like Thomas Ellis. But like you have particular Baptists. Basically, what happens in England is you have like these kind of more free will, kind of open Baptists who are more Arminian in their soteriology, and like particular Baptists that are more Reformed. You probably have on the kind of free will side, guys coming from like Anabaptist type background. And then you have like the more Puritan kind of Reformed kind of guys are coming through, and they're becoming Baptist. The weird thing is like it's kind of happening parallel and like simultaneously, and they're pretty much cool with each other. You would have associations or like groups of Baptist churches that would kind of work together and be like, it's okay that we disagree on some of these things, because the other, like those kind of 5 Baptist distinctives, these are things that are a little bit more important to Baptist.
Right.
So it's a fascinating kind of movement, and it's just hard to track, because like there's not really, we don't really have like a John Calvin.
Mhm.
Like you have Calvin, and like there's so much has been said about like how Calvinists are different from Calvin, and we know that, but he's obviously still a very important figure, and like a
Yeah.
lot of interpreters of Calvin, are following him, and different kind of you know branches are following him in different kind of ways. Same thing kind of with like Luther.
Mhm.
You have these movements that are kind of oriented around like a big thinker, a big personality, and Baptists are
Correct
kind
me if
of
I'm wrong.
grassroots.
Like, Tyler, this is kind of what Dr. Rathel, Dr. Chun, and all of their minions, i.e., you, like, you guys are trying to point to some people that were kind of key figureheads for where we came from. Like,
Yeah,
that's what you
sure.
guys are doing with Fuller and trying to figure out. Yeah, Fuller and, I know Dr. Rathel wrote on John Gill, who was
Yeah.
another influential Baptist guy.
Yeah. He's a great example of this kind of question of like hyper Calvinism. So let me grab the book actually. I think I got it right here.
You didn't know there was so much Baptist history, did you, John?
I did. I just also knew it
Chose
started
to
in
ignore it.
1885. when Tyler was like, he's like, we went to the very first ever Baptist church. I wanted to be like, you went to a church that was built in 1915, but I didn't say that.
Yeah.
So this is the Bebington book.
Mhm.
I think this was written like in 80, 88, 89, something. Is that right? Maybe even earlier. 89. So he talks about Fuller in here, and like I just came across this while I was working on a paper last semester, and one of the big things he mentions is like Edwards. We're all pretty sure Jonathan Edwards had a big influence on Andrew Fuller. But it was years later until like Chris Chun, my supervisor, kind of did the work and kind of proved it, right? But like a sentence earlier, Bebington talks about John Gill, and he's kind of painting like there's this kind of idea. Taylor and I talked about this recently. There's this idea. Uh, in history, we talk in like stereotypes some ways, or like big picture, and it's not really exactly right. And you zoom in and you see more detail, and it gets more nuanced, and we all become kind of like nuanced bros because it gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and you start to see just like these just, but like that's like kind of the pattern in academia. Like you have big movements and big ideas, and you kind of see them in black and white, and you just have to like kind of get zoom in and zoom in. So in Bebington's book, he talks about John Gill, and he's kind of when John Gill's representative of like the high Calvinist, and Fuller is kind of opposed to that. So John Gill is a super interesting guy, though. He's from Kettering, and he ends up, I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, Taylor, I think he ends up pastoring the church that Spurgeon eventually
Yeah.
pastors, right?
Yeah. Well,
John Gill,
I don't remember the name, but then it changed.
yeah, I think it
Spurgeon changes
changed.
the name.
Yeah. So he's a popular Baptist preacher and pastor, and he's like the first Baptist systematic theologian. He wrote like extensively. He actually wrote like a systematic theology. I think it's called The Body of Systematic Divinity, something like that. It's not easy to read, but all these Baptist guys read it. Fuller is reading Gill, even though he's like a high Calvinist. Everyone's reading Gill because like he's kind of created like the essential Baptist theology work.
Mhm.
But kind of what I was saying is like we kind of had this idea like Gill is like he's like a high Calvinist, Fuller's like opposed to him, and then you have like kind of Edwards is this kind of important influence on Fuller. But as time has gone on, Rathel's dissertation, he talks about Gill, and he's like we've kind of misunderstood Gill a little bit. And it seems like Fuller was actually more directly combating like the next generation, like the people who were kind of following Gill into this high Calvinism, but it's a little
Interesting.
different. And
Mhm.
Gill's hyper Calvinism isn't so um against evangelism. It's not pushing as hard in that kind of direction. It's just a little different. So you have these kind of, you zoom in, the more you zoom in, the more kind of contours and details you kind of see.
Yeah.
Um And Rathel's kind of point in his dissertation is, or one of the points is like, yeah, like Fuller's getting stuff from Gill too. So you get closer. I do think that's a part of it. Like Taylor said, is like we're trying to kind of, find these guys and put them up as uh, people we should look back to, and people who did kind of set direction for us as a um, and I always felt, I guess we call Baptist like a denomination. It kind of feels weird to say that because we're so in a lot of ways different. But I guess that'd be like kind of the best kind of category or term for it. But like, yeah, Fuller's an interesting guy in there. Gill's an interesting guy. On Friday, Taylor came up to my office and we were talking. I'm working on like a little blog post on a guy named Caleb Evans. Caleb Evans was he was a principal of Bristol Baptist Academy, is what it was called then. And Bristol is Bristol's a pretty big town in England, and in Caleb Evans' time, which is like he's kind of like generation before Fuller, he's you have Bristol's a port city, so there's like 3 major port cities in England that have a ton to do with the British slave trade, which at that point is like essentially the worldwide slave trade. It's enormous, right? The other 2 cities were London and Liverpool. And Caleb Evans and other leaders and ministers in different traditions, Quakers, Anglicans, they get really convicted about how all these terrible abuses happening in the slave trade. There are some abolitionist groups that are starting to do reports. They're kind of like finding all this, not just like horrible physical like abuse and torment of slaves, but lots of corruption and like it's terrible. And a lot of people in Bristol don't really like the slave trade, but it's a part of their economy. It's kind of part of just the world they're aware of. And so Caleb Evans becomes like an abolitionist, and he dies before it's really solved in England, or before you have these kind of nationwide decrees outlawing slavery. But it's fascinating because no one knows Caleb Evans, right? And he's this kind of important, local abolitionist and a Baptist. And the funny thing that I also came across with him is one of his contemporaries is John Wesley. We all know John Wesley, right? Like, we're talking about like, figureheads of movements, like John Wesley's one of them. And we all love John Wesley. There's a lot of stuff to love about John Wesley. And Wesley and Evans are in agreement on abolition, like on freeing the end of end of slavery. And they vehemently disagree on the taxation of the American colonies by like the British monarchy.
Wow.
So Wesley thinks it's fine. He's like, yeah, they're colonies. They should get taxed. And Caleb Evans is like, there should be no taxation without representation. How is this guy not popular in America?
My own heart. Oh my gosh.
It's crazy, right? How do we not know this
awesome.
guy?
Yeah, I didn't even imagine that they had opinions in England about like that kind of stuff, which I guess makes a lot of sense. But for us, we always kind of look at it with a very American-centric view. But yeah, that's so interesting, man.
And they're
he just
making
went up a
these
couple notches
arguments
in my
theologically.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
theology that's driving these things. It's their views of what human freedom is and like free will. Like these are ideas that are driving them to kind of reshape their practice of Christianity and how they interact in the world. And they're these guys just had a ton of energy, it seems like to me, and they wanted to like change the world. And it's all these these British dudes in this little kind of unimportant part of England.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
If you could, would you be able to talk a little bit about the Baptist Missionary Society? Because I think that's a big deal. A lot of our listeners probably know the name William Carey.
Yeah.
And they might not know that like Andrew Fuller and William Carey knew each other well.
Yeah. So the Baptist Missionary Society, it's crazy. It was also, so Fuller and some of these other local guys around him, they start the Baptist Missionary Society. They get really strong conviction that they need to be preaching to the unconverted. And then, then you start to believe that, and you're like, oh my gosh, like there's whole countries, there's whole parts of the world that have never heard the gospel. Like we got to go. and they get pushback, of course, from like some of the more high Calvinist. God, you shouldn't. I think I can't remember who it was. Someone I think confronted Carey, either Carey or Fuller at one of the meetings, and was like God will save who He wants to save.
Yeah,
Like
like
you are being
they're currently under
presumptuous.
God's wrath if they're in darkness. So let's not
That's right.
intervene with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Wowza.
not your job. You're taking God's job essentially. So
Mhm.
it's not without controversy. And it's crazy. Like my friend and I, we got to Kettering this past summer, and we got, there's like I think it was a Friday. There's like a little music festival going on, and people are outside hanging out in this kind of, I mean, no one likes, like, we told people we were going to Kettering, and they were like, why? Like, it's not like a cool, like, beautiful place to hang. It's just a regular little British town, like a working class town.
Mhm.
And we get there and we just walk by the building where the Baptist Missionary Society was housed, and they have like a plaque outside. And they're like, oh, 1792 was established.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my gosh, it's like right here. But yeah, so they start this thing. There's a lot. Fuller helped start it. He's like the secretary, and so he's doing a lot of fundraising for it. He's going and speaking about it a lot. He's preaching in his church, but he's also preaching kind of all the time. He's writing about it, and collecting a lot of the information. There's lots of letters we have, in various kind of archives around that, or like he's corresponding back and forth with missionaries. William Carey is an important missionary they send out to India, of course, and Carey referred to Fuller as the guy holding the end of the rope. As in, like, Carey is like, he's gone over the edge of a cliff and he's hanging, and Fuller's the guy on the top holding onto the rope.
Mhm.
Which is funny because, like, just like you said, like we everyone knows William Carey in the Baptist world. My hometown, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, is where William Carey
Yeah.
University is. When I was there, it was
Wow.
William Carey College.
Mhm.
And I took a picture. It's so funny. Like when we were at Fuller Baptist Church in Kettering, the church that he was at, there was actually a plaque in there from William Carey College. I think it was for one of the anniversaries of the church.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so missions. I think what we would probably say is like William Carey is a representative of like the modern missions movement, right?
Mhm.
Which isn't necessarily without controversy, but like still very much like the vein. Like I would say, I'm about to start preaching here. I think that's kind of the center, or should be the center, of like the Southern Baptist Convention still. Like really the International Mission Board, I think would still today be like Carey is like our model, or at least one of our
Yeah.
major
Yeah.
um like the head kind of that we're following here, that we're like
Well,
a body of.
that's what I sort of love about these guys, is that they landed in this spot theologically, and then they said, "Well, we have to do something with this."
Yeah.
It
That's why
wasn't
the fourth
yeah.
part of this quadrilateral that's always sticking out to me is the activism, right? It's like,
Mhm.
once we have all of these views, now we have to figure out what we actually do to implement them.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, we can all poke holes in that era of global missions, but
sure.
at the same time, yeah, what was being done before that? Like I'm not
Right.
probably not very much. Not to mention, this was still a time when evangelism via colonialism was kind of the main
Right.
method of doing things. So yeah, still
Yep.
a drastic step forward, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
William
when it's
Carey, I've talked to a handful of Indians over the years, and he's like a superhero over there.
Mm-hmm.
Like they
yeah,
do, like
he
they all know his name and they all like love
no,
him.
yeah. He
Yeah, I
instituted
believe
a
it.
lot of cultural change, and like today there are a lot of things we have to look back with missionaries. Colonialism, of course, is like um a major talking point, and I think with that, even if it wasn't formal colonialism, there's this kind of oftentimes, unfortunately, there's this import of or an enforcing of like Western culture.
Yeah.
Uh, on top of, maybe an indigenous culture. And, sometimes that gets expressed in like eradication of language.
Hmm.
Um, uh, some practices need to go. I mean, uh,
Absolutely.
there was certainly stuff happening in India that Carrie helped in that was good. It was like this was a positive cultural transformation.
Hmm.
I've done a little bit of work on like missions in Hawaii. My wife is from Hawaii.
Oh, that's sweet.
She's not Hawaiian. She's
Hmm.
half Japanese, half white. Her dad's parents immigrated from Japan, and settled on Maui. But there's a really interesting history of missions in Hawaii, and like I think it was like 1830s, 1820s. It was like Congregationalists came, and they were by all accounts extremely successful, and many
Hmm.
converted. Tons of people converted, but they brought a lot of Western culture. They did kind of eradicate language, a lot of Hawaiian practice that probably didn't need to get eradicated.
Sure.
And then all their children were, I say that's overstating it. Many of their children, many of the missionaries' children were terrible, and they helped
Mm.
overthrow the Hawaiian government.
Ah, these
You know,
MKs always up to trouble, man.
yeah.
Gosh.
But what's crazy is those first missionaries were so thought of to be so successful that Hawaii was thought of as a Christian nation. Southern
Wow.
Baptists didn't even go to Hawaii until like the 1930s or
Yeah.
40s.
We're like, they're bottom of
With
the list.
Yeah, they're like it's
Yeah.
kind of done. Like they've done it. And a few missionaries don't really even make it there until at that period, a lot of Hawaiian people had already died out. A lot of culture had disappeared, and there were tons of immigrants in Hawaii. There were probably more Japanese people in Hawaii than any other people group. There's also lots of Chinese immigrants there, and from various Asian countries.
Mm.
And at the start of World War II, I think there were missionaries headed. There were some new missionaries going to Japan, and I think returning missionaries heading back to China on a boat. And like World War II starts to break out, and they get stuck. They get stopped in Hawaii, and the International Mission Board is like, "You guys should just stay there. Just work with Japanese and Chinese people there." And so they did, and that was kind of the start of uh, SBC work. A
Mm.
lot of Baptist work, but certainly Southern Baptist work in Hawaii. But like, yeah, there's if you go today and talk to people, there's complicated feelings about Westerners
Of
and
course.
Christianity, and uh, those things got packaged together
Hmm.
in a way that wasn't great. So there's certainly things we should question, or like, what did we say earlier? Admit, be honest
Yeah.
about, the
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
missionary
It
movement.
helps the dialogue, yeah, because I mean,
Yeah,
in a day and time like this, like, I think a willingness to look at history, not necessarily critically, but honestly, above all, like, I think, my whole thing when it comes to history is tell the whole story. Like, tell the side where the missionaries were successful and where the natives were super grateful and where everyone was shaking hands and having a great time, but also tell the story about how, there were some feathers ruffled and maybe some good things lost that didn't need to be because the missionaries didn't have maybe the kind of foresight that they could have. So,
sure.
yeah, it's not really about throwing one side out. It's just let's tell those stories so that we can learn from it.
Well, and
Yeah.
like, and be honest about context. It's complicated. And,
Hmm.
one of the things Fuller wrote is, there's like a defense he has of like the mission, in India with Carey and other missionaries who were there from the Baptist Missionary Society. And he's advocating, I think it's either in that or it's in like a set of letters. He's advocating like the British government about
Hmm.
missionaries staying around because the British government doesn't necessarily want the missionaries there, you know?
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
the truth is like it's a super complicated situation. You do have like colonialists there. You have British representatives of like the British nation, the monarchy who are um in India for very specific reasons to expand the empire, and you know, create economic growth, for the greater British country, the greater, probably really just for England, but like, for the kind of greater British Empire. There's all this trade happening. So they have their interest. You have all kinds of local groups in India. Some are, probably benefiting from this and happily working with Brits. You have people who are vehemently against it. You have all kinds of religious perspectives in India that are agreeing or fighting about it. And you have missionaries there from lots of different denominations, probably different countries. Like, it's just a very complex kind of tapestry of interests and decision making, and yeah, like, it's not always easy to make the right decision in those
Mhm.
kind of situations. Sometimes you do things that are maybe the easiest way, or you sacrifice something, you compromise in some way so that you can, achieve this other goal. But it's I think in the heart of it, when you look at it kind of from the Baptist side, I think there was a lot of earnestness there. And, some of the work that William Carey is doing, he's trying to translate, he's learning the language so that he
Mhm.
can translate the Bible. And like, that means they're starting like publishing houses there, and they're printing all kinds of stuff. They're not just printing Bibles. There's all kinds of stuff they're trying to do. So there's just like all these interesting little outworkings of this Baptist Missionary Society around the world. And the interesting is in Kettering, there's not a lot about Andrew Fuller there. The church is called Fuller Baptist Church. But they're a little bit proud of the Baptist Missionary Society. Like that, like there was this little there's like little historical sites and stuff like that, and things where they kind of talk about the history publicly, and they're okay with the Baptist Missionary Society. And a guy who was in Fuller's church, he's like a generation younger. I think he would have been under Fuller's pastor at least for a while. He's his name is William Knibb, and they love William Knibb. William Knibb was a missionary to Jamaica who became a major abolitionist and a major opponent of the slave trade, and he was pretty successful in dismantling that in Jamaica. But you go to Fuller Baptist Church, I took pictures of it. They have a big painting of William Knibb at the front of the sanctuary, and the youth room. Like they've got like, so upstairs they've got like the Fuller archive where they have all this kind of cool stuff. About a third of it is Fuller, a third of it is like Baptist Missionary Society, kind of William Knibb. Maybe it's more like half Fuller, and maybe a third, and then it's just some other kind of missionary kind of stuff upstairs. Um, so they represent that too, and they're proud of that too. But like the youth room, there's a giant, like it was kind of in the style of like graffiti or whatever. It's like Nib, KNIBB written
That's
on the wall.
awesome. That's super cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's reasons in the modern world that's maybe valued more, an abolitionist, regardless of their religious perspective. Like, the world kind of sets a higher value in that than like a Baptist pastor. But, a lot of that spun out of the work that these guys were doing. I think that value of human life and freedom, is spinning out of their theology. And, we also got to remember these guys are pastors too,
Yeah.
That's kind of something I think I'm personally kind of proud of as a Baptist, is like, these guys they're ministers. They're preaching every Sunday, and they're out seeing people, doing visits with people, and they're with people when they're sick. I'm not very far in this paper yet, but I'm working on one. It's a funeral sermon that Fuller preached.
Mhm.
They're burying people. They're marrying people. They're
Right.
doing the classic kind of work of a pastor, and they're theologians. They're writing and they're thinking. They're doing all stuff, but it's always in the context of a congregation, and I think that
Yeah.
does give them a it's again, it's a kind of that low church thing that we can be proud of. There's a vitality to their work because, like, that the activism I did, they're very hands on. This is
Yeah.
not ivory tower
Yeah,
theology
it's
in
a
a way,
living and breathing kind of ministry because it's born out of the boots on the ground stuff that only a real shepherd can be
Yeah,
involved in. It's
yeah,
not just, like you said, it's not just some dude who gets to dedicate 60 hours a week to studying the Hebrew and Habakkuk because
right.
he's got workers tending to his land for him and stuff
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
So yeah.
One of the most interesting things I found, and I don't even really know what it means at this point. So part of this trip, we got to go to Oxford University. There's a Baptist college there that has a library called the Angus Library. And we got to go, and they knew kind of what I was working on. I emailed with like the archivist, and they were just bringing stuff out, and they brought out a diary of Andrew Fuller that I guess not a lot of work has been done on. It was kind of interesting. I've got a journal right here. He wrote on it from both sides. So like this is the front, right?
Uh-huh.
And he's kind of writing like you would expect on a book. Then he like flipped it over and he wrote from the back too, which is funny. It's a weird thing I've done too, where like, I guess if I just have like a different idea that doesn't fit with everything else I've been doing.
Yeah.
But I think it was notes on Isaiah. He's just kind of going through, writing down his thoughts on Isaiah. But in the back, what he had been doing, it looked like he was just copying Hebrew out of like a dictionary or workbook, where he's just kind of like, it's all in order. He's got the characters. He's got like a little definition, like how to say the word, and kind of some references where it appears in the Bible. And these are guys who are not super educated, but they're super interested. So they're teaching themselves Greek and Hebrew. They're learning it on the ground. And like, he's got his journal. So he probably, I guess, he was borrowing someone's book or something like that. And he's just copying it and working through it. And I just think that's such it's such an important thing to keep track of, because I think, again, like that big kind of question I have of why people are leaving low church for like high church, there is an attraction to that. And I think it feels like you're joining a tradition that's been around for thousands of years, and like there's a little bit more something like kind of solid about that. It's a foundation that's kind of bigger than me. Maybe I'm part of a bigger movement, something like that. But I loved it that there's a lot of Baptist pastors today. Taylor and I are going to be going to the Southern Baptist Convention meeting in Orlando in a few months. And I have mixed feelings about it. There's a lot of money that gets spent building the exhibit hall, and like all those people travel there, and it's Orlando. So you also know everyone's like going to Disney World, and,
Right.
there's just like, it's kind of a complex thing. But what always feeds me is like, I'll be at the booth and someone will come by and I'll be engaging them. And it's a guy who's 75 years old, and he retired from his main ministry, but he's pastoring a small church in a small town. And he's talked to him, and he's just this is his life, man. And he cares about his people, and he's asking me what I think. And I'm like, I need to be asking you everything.
Yeah, we need to be switching positions here. I need you behind this booth. Yeah.
But the reason he's doing that is because he still has that vitality. He wants to serve his people better. And so he's just bouncing ideas off people. Oh, what do you think about this? Or they'll just tell you stuff. Or like, yeah, we're trying to like reach out to like, the kids in the neighborhood. And you hear that like, oh, this church is it's a bad area. And they're like, yeah, so this is what we're going to try. What do you think about that? And you're like, dude, this is amazing, And I hope that we can pick up that tradition and hold on to that and be not sinfully proud, but in a non-sinful way, proud of like, yeah, we're Baptists are people, we're people of the Bible, but we're also like people of the people,
Yeah.
and we like to be in there with everybody. We do a lot of stuff wrong. And like, again, we keep talking about, we have to admit where Southern Baptists came from. There's problems with our origin, major problems with our origin that we don't want to always deal with. But there's a lot of earnestness, I think, in just the average Baptist pastor. They want they want people to know Christ. They want their town to be a better place to live because people are getting transformed by the gospel. And, wherever they end up politically or whatever, all that stuff, that kind of, I want to have grace for that kind of stuff, because, my belief is that a lot of pastors are similar to Fuller. They're out there just trying, and they have that impulse, that I think comes from, the Holy Spirit to like tell someone about Christ.
Yeah, I think, one thing that I have always loved about Baptists, and I can say that even joking, both inside and outside the ranks of Baptists in these days. But like the fact is, I do see Baptists as the most salt of the earth of the Christian traditions alive today, because you guys kind of arrived at this point in history. Like there weren't any Baptist city states in, post Reformation. Like you guys weren't like mega attached with the larger institutions and magistrates that other denominations were. You were with and for and by the people. And like, I mean, I mentioned coming from a Dutch Reformed tradition. I mean, shoot, if any of our listeners know, like if you're even in the CRC and the RCA today, the two biggest Dutch Reformed traditions in America and in Canada, they're still having arguments about if they're too Dutch or not Dutch enough. Like there's still, there's still these ties of like, are we paying enough homage to our forefathers and from where we came from and to the motherland? And then there's people who are just like, who cares? Let's just be for the people, by the people. And they certainly are that, but yeah, I think that there is kind of like this earnestness that I've always noticed with Baptists, but I think is really cool. And maybe one day I'll be a Baptist again. I don't know. I think I'll just be a Christian.
We're ready for you,
right,
man.
Taylor? Yeah, I know. The Baptists, they've always got their arms open, man. Arms open and fellowship hall open with a potluck.
Fellowship hall. Hey, as we close, let's make sure we hit some shout outs for Spotify commenters. So Riders Blade, Anthony, Reed Jones, LM, Jay Richa, Jackson, Matt G.
Yeah, dude, we appreciate everyone who commented just showing love to
Yes.
Tom, because that's going to
Yes.
hopefully guilt trip him so much that he can't stay away for long, or guilt trip him so much that he can never come back, which means he won't play with our emotions, listeners. Because we all know, you need a clean break sometimes.
Also, Dan Harmsen gets the greatest shout out because he's a Catholic listener, and
he is. And
has
usually
stayed
Catholic
with-
listeners
cool.
leave mean comments.
yeah, Tyler,
Because of
you don't know
Taylor.
this, but I basically say anti-papal things like,
First of all, you call them papists, which is basically a Reformation era slur, you dog.
Man.
It's not okay. But yeah, Taylor's got he's got a little bone to pick, I guess. I think a Catholic probably said something bad about his guitar playing when he was a kid during some formative years, and those
That's
scars
right.
never
it's
heal.
all personal, which is why we're glad that Dan is here.
That's right. We sure are. But yeah, we love all of our listeners. We love John, we love Matt, we love LM. I'm not gonna list all of you guys, but we love and appreciate you guys. Feel free to throw us some money. That's such a degenerate thing to say right after we talk about how much we love you guys. We love you guys
This
so
podcast
much.
is free to you, but not free to us.
It's not free to us. And here's the thing. We love you eternally, but when you pay us enough money, then we know how much you love us. We'll be like, I love John and Taylor, $5 worth.
What if
Or
we
take it. That's
sold
fine.
Chump Nation indulgences?
What does that mean?
I
Because
don't
I
know.
can't do that with the Lord. Like I
Yeah.
can't guarantee someone's uncle out of purgatory. I don't even believe him. Wait, do you guys believe in purgatory again, Taylor?
What? No.
Baptists? No.
I don't know. I got concerned for a second. I was
Listen,
like,
I'll
you guys are
do a
really
draw.
backslidden.
We'll
No
have a
wonder you're not
little-
excited about this convention. You guys are back in purgatory. There's some
I'm gonna-
horrible things
I'm gonna
happening
have
in
a
this
little
denomination.
certificate. We'll have a little certificate drawn up. It'll be like
Actually,
a little,
that would be a lot of fun, doing like little mock certificates that like
Of
we like laminate
indulgences.
them.
yeah.
Have a little seal in the bottom corner.
I don't know.
like
I don't
that.
know what they would do. We won't be blasphemous with it, but
Right.
Well, you guys
Right.
should have private episodes. That's the thing, and then you'll sell indulgences for access to your private episodes.
We've been trying to go against the paywall thing. 'Cause that's what everybody does.
that's right.
And we also try to encourage flat fee gifts to the show, because everything is subscription based. And I just think of all the poor grandmothers who sign up for a subscription because they think it's a one-time thing, and they wonder why their social security is drained at the end of every month. And it's because the system is predatory, and I don't want to play that game, Grandma.
Or sign grandma up for a subscription to Church History for Chumps.
That's right. Yeah. The system may not be predatory, but you can be predatory. So there we go.
Anyway,
All
we
right.
love you
Well,
guys.
we
And
really
Tyler,
do.
thank you for coming in and just
Absolutely,
dropping
man.
knowledge at every corner, bro.
Yeah.
Well,
this was a good.
it
good
was
fun
an honor.
episode.
I've really enjoyed being here. I'd be happy to come back some other time and talk about Baptist or something else. I think you said at the beginning, I was listening to the Satanic Panic episode, and I'd love to talk about weird stuff too. So that would be That would
Here's
be
the
fun.
thing.
So
Whenever we're in between series, we just want to get weird. Like I don't even know what we're gonna do before we start the Second Crusade. But we've got to get some off the wall stuff going. Satanic Panic was probably one of my favorite episodes to
Yes.
research because it was a wild time.
What was crazy to me, if listeners, if you haven't listened to that one, go back. It was around Halloween. Is how we landed the plane and we were like, I guess
They might be right.
I kind of understand them.
We're like, they weren't right as far as like any of the things they were saying, but we also get it. Like we get it. We'll see. All right.
Oh gosh.
We love you guys. Tyler, thanks again. It's loved having you on, man. We'll definitely have you on again soon. Just yeah. All right. We'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.